Okay. Residential solar leasing. I'm Mike. I just do that. It's a pleasure to see y'all. I know pretty much everybody here, a couple of faces out there, but glad to be here. I'm a project manager under Tim. Here to talk to you guys about solar leasing. I'll brief to the safety moment. We'll talk about why solar leasing, why are we having this conversation now? What brought us to this point? Proposed process, see how y'all like it. Project scope, what would it take to make that process come to life? Questions for you guys. That's going to be the bulk of this. So we'll kind of go through this pretty quickly. I think y'all kind of know what leasing is. We want to get to those questions. So personal safety moment. Be careful out there. It's slippery. I know it's defrosting. It might refreeze. Just be careful. Speed limits were set for good conditions, not bad conditions. So slow down in bad conditions. Maintain a really large following distance, especially if you're like me and have never lived somewhere with a lot of ice and snow, and you don't know what you're doing like me. So just be careful. We can ignore the snowplow piece here. We don't have those. Bridges, ramps, we all know those get iced up more easily, and we don't really have great infrastructure for de-icing. And if you do start to slide, you want to take your foot off the gas, steer into the direction of the slide, get yourself facing the right direction until you don't hit the gas or the brakes. And just ease off the gas if you can get yourself straightened out. Don't hit the gas until you get straightened out. Don't oversteer. Be cool and calm in that situation. Okay, so what is solar leasing? Residential customers enter into an agreement with a leasing provider through their solar contractor who does the actual installation. Residential customers get a really low or maybe even potentially no cost installation. They pay a monthly fee to have that on the rooftop, have the rent the equipment that goes onto their rooftop, and they receive value of solar on their bills. Leasing companies own it, operate it, they have to maintain it, and they leverage those tax credits so that they can pass through lower costs to the actual customers. Installation companies provide the lease, and they partner with those leasing companies. So they're the face that interface with the customer that then proposes these leasing options to the customers. So why is this so complicated? Why is it something that we haven't just over sooner? Well, quite honestly, we'll get to that slide next, but leases are something we haven't seen a lot of here. I think our customers are just pretty new to a lot of them. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there's some terms in there that don't come into play if you're owning it yourself. Like what happens if you sell a property or somebody's not paying their piece of it, right? So there's just kind of new concepts here for customers to navigate. And so having an education component, having a consumer protection around that is something that we are thinking of. I've been always cognizant of. And then beyond that, a step further, we have Texas Utility Code law that we're very careful about. And that is that we are the sole provider of energy to customers in our territory. And a lease that is denominated in kilowatt hours starts to look like a VPA, starts to look like another company selling energy in our territory. And in a space, maybe that doesn't sound so scary to our business model, but the law gets a little fuzzy and it starts to open up this kind of precedence and it starts to chink at the armor a bit. So we're having to be very careful to maintain our status as the sole provider of energy in our territory. So, but why is now? Why are we having this conversation now? Well, all y'all know the residential tax credits expired at the end of last year. So commercial tax credits, however, have not. We have time to safe harbor. We have time to do installations until the end of next year. And because these are owned by a commercial entity, even though they're on a residential rooftop, these are commercial projects. So they should qualify for the commercial tax credits. That includes additional tax credits that residential owners should never receive, including the maker's depreciation. So why are we looking at this? Because we are committed to trying to help our customers and contractors, local community, to have the best offerings and all the offerings they can to keep the industry sustained, to meet our resource generation plan goals, to have clean local generation. And so this is another tool in our toolbox that we plan to sharpen up. So I'm zipping through this, but I want to get to the questions. So this is our proposed customer process. So we've evaluated a number of more hands-on routes where we would be policing a lot of these leases. And what we've kind of led ourselves to and floating today is more of a hands-off approach, where we cover everybody legally by having an interconnection agreement with an attestation that everybody signs off on a lease. It just basically says, I'm not offering or taking part in a lease that violates the law, that gets into that fuzzy area where you're selling, another provider selling energy to a customer. In there, we expect to line out some language that we would like to not see. So putting some examples of what would constitute a non-compliant lease. We already have been working on an interconnection agreement for a number of years prior to this, because if you don't go through the rebate program, you miss out on a lot of information. You miss out on the value of solar, all the education components. You miss out on some of the processes that you get through the education course, like how the metering team comes after the inspection passes, and that is really when your system can be energized. All these things are kind of help set expectations we haven't been able to inform customers on very well anyways. So we've been working towards having an interconnection agreement as standard practice. Now it's catalyzed that effort by saying, okay, well, we can use that interconnection agreement as an opportunity to allow these leases more thoroughly, allow them to happen without us having to read every lease agreement, by having this legal language there that everybody signs off on. So that would be signed and delivered and uploaded with the permit application across the board for all residential projects. This is already in place for systems over 500 kilowatts. This would just go into place for everything else. And I want to ask y'all about who should be signing it. We have right here the customer and the system owner, but I'm interested to hear what y'all think about that. And then the customer education piece. So putting something on our website, we already have a pretty excellent customer education portfolio on the website. This would be an added module that would cover leasing pitfalls, and this is another question I have for y'all. And what are the things that we need to make sure that we cover to protect customers in the best way, while giving them good expectations and not painting leases as this bad thing, but just rather something to be careful of and know what you're reading and know what you're entering into as a contract. So we'll develop that education module. And then from there, it's just the normal process, the regular permitting process, nothing fancy here. You just upload this additional form at the front end. The rest of it goes through smoothly as it does today. And then we're talking about incentives, if we want to incentivize, if it's appropriate for us to incentivize these or not. And it's a question I have for y'all. So that's the proposed customer process. To make that happen, here's the project scope. So first step was to get legal's approval for this process, which luckily we crossed that bridge. Legal's given us the go. So we're okay there. We're moving forward. Here we are today, January 28th, having our first community meeting. We just may have another one. I'm going to ask you all for topics that we want to talk about in the next one. We need to develop that interconnection agreement with that attestation language in there. So interconnection agreement's like 75% done. We're working with legal, with the regulatory to crack that language, put it into place, get it approved. And then we have to put that into Amanda, the permitting system, as a required document, which is its own process, working with the Amanda side of the house. We do it, but it's kind of cumbersome. So then we need to create our education module on leasing. We're kicking that off this week. And then pilot program, we're shooting for March to launch this. So we have it lined out. We know what we need to do. What we don't know are some of the particulars around how leases work, on how this process would work for y'all who are on the ground floor making this stuff happen. So, got a list of questions here. I'll pause for a second before I really get into the questions. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, feedback on this general approach? Awesome. Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
I know you guys have been working really hard on this because I've been involved with you guys working on this from the very beginning, which I really appreciate. I know you lawyers have been working really hard at trying to make this work, and I understand the problems. My concern is consumer protection. And it's my understanding from every single instrument that you guys have looked at, there are serious consumer protection issues with each type of leasing document. Well, if that's the case, and we can't seem to find an instrument out there that's gonna work, then where are we? And so my question is, can we circle back around and with some of these, institutions and say, here's our red lines. Let's see if we can find a way to compromise on some things here. Because what I don't want to end up with is another consumer protection problem. The other thing is, one of the concerns I have is that a consumer enters into an agreement, the installation occurs, and then they come to you with this interconnection agreement. It's kind of like late in the game for the installer, for the consumer,
They
right?
sign it at the beginning of the permit process, before they.
Beginning, okay, all right, okay. Well, I don't know. I just, again, there's no way for you all to stop leasing. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen, so,
Without us knowing right now.
and so again, we've got consumers out there that are very vulnerable. And I think even if you put things on the website, those contracts are really difficult to understand. And I'm not sure that there's a way to educate everybody in a way to protect themselves. So is that something that would even be considered by Austin Energy? I know it's a lot of trouble and time and money for the attorneys, but the other thing I'm concerned about is if we don't come up with something, there are a lot of people out there that are talking about going back to the legislature and fixing it. And so that if it gets passed, you guys would have to do something, make a change somehow. And I still have consumers that are exposed.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is. I know you guys are working hard to try to get this figured out, but I still have, even with what you all are proposing, which I think is a good start, that we might want to think about, can we come up with, even if it's our own instrument that I share, or something that you guys can point to and say, this is a decent financing arrangement. Find something that looks like this.
Yeah, we definitely have gone down the path with legal, I think, the idea of creating a template.
Yeah,
It's just not something that our legal team
feels comfortable doing.
knows how to do. And so they talked about hiring outside counsel. That costs money and time. That's our procurement to do that. So that's 6 months.
Yeah,
And even then, it's like, is it our goal? And it's a good question for the group too. It's like, is it our goal to create contracts? It's not something we've done before. The industry, this is an approach that lets the industry kind of police themselves to some extent, and we in the market to, there's a little bit everywhere here, but we want to try and inform our customers to go into these the best informed they can be. Similar to loans, we don't standardize loan contracts. Some of those are pretty hairy. Obviously, yeah, share your concern. So I'm very interested to have this group workshop with me and with us on how we can protect customers, because it's obviously something we care a lot about. Just the burden of reviewing every contract that comes in.
sure.
Was not tenable, and we were like, can we use AI? That was a no-go. And then creating a standardized template. First, we've heard from leasing providers that they're not interested in using anything of their own. So we lose some of those big companies right off the bat. But it's not something that we would say no to necessarily. I'm very interested to hearing more. It's just something we've explored, and it's not found a way to do it cognitively.
I'm just thinking if we could come up with one.
Yeah.
But
one that works I hear what you're saying.
if we could come up with one, you could point your customers. It's not necessarily your business to say, go do business with this company,
Right.
but you could say, this is a decent contract. It would potentially, ward off any kind of legislation next year, because then we could say, well, we have one.
What are the difficulties in approving a contract, like in approving a company, a leasing company for Austin Energy customers? Basically going through their processes, making sure they're on the up and up, have them sign up, make sure they're certified for, and then customer feels a little more comfortable.
I know I had never hands up. Sam's got his hand up. We'll go with it first.
Just, I'm curious why you're calling it a leasing program? And this is maybe to get to the point a little bit. It's a complicated interaction, no matter how we skin it. And we've just kind of tried to get more comfortable with TPO. I know PPA is off the table, but there are other contracts with different names. They're not leases. And this is where the lease provider or the TPO provider is wrestling with the terms. And sometimes lease is a problem. It's a problem for customers because they don't understand that it's a car lease or, if there's too much baggage with this word, there's a bad stigma on it already. Are you open to sort of going more wonky on it as a way to you gotta invite people you gotta participate in complexity. This is not an easy button, but it's a powerful instrument. And just calling it solar leases sounds too general, well, not general enough to allow the kind of flexibility that you're trying to pursue with this process. So
I have a question. Steve, does that protect the tax credit opportunity for the homeowner?
I mean, that's all baked in the contract. So I think
Okay.
the contract has to hit the term to satisfy the tax authorities on the, for the financiers. I mean,
So we say basically, open up the nomenclature to third party ownership or something.
yeah, for you guys to be kind of more omnibus.
Rebranded.
Yeah, I think it's important to help people.
We're not stuck on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I don't think the nomenclature is the issue. I think that the challenge is, think about this in terms of extremes. If we go too wonky per se, then people don't even know what it is. And it's like, there's no, it's already challenging enough maybe with solar leasing, but at least there's a concept of what that is.
Yeah, because the ownership piece is really critical for people to understand, because there's some offers that are a pathway to ownership.
Right.
They're different than other pathways to ownership, and that's critical for that consumer protection, but they understand where their ownership starts or doesn't start.
So we're recording this?
Yes.
Just very quick, Mike. From a service perspective, so if something goes wrong with the system and I'm sent out as a technician to, let's say we're trying to trace a ground fault, something like that. Do I have eminent domain? I mean, these people don't own this system. So how does, that's gotta be complicated too. And I agree with Stan, I think the rebranding thing. Well, go ahead. I want to get to how does that work as far as getting in there to troubleshoot and everything?
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, would they similar?
I would never do this with my room personally. I just don't mean to poop with the program, but it's just kind of like, that's sort of one thing I would be saying, going, I don't know. It's not my system.
Right.
Well, that's probably part of the contract or the contract
Yeah.
with the customers
Okay.
that they have.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of asking those of y'all who are more familiar with lease agreements on some of these terms, how do they work? Like a new service. That's a great
Yeah,
question.
so I mean, access would be built into the lease agreement itself. That's the SNDA portion and not disturb portion. So it's a bad lease if you don't have ability to access it, but that's just one of the aspects. But yeah, I mean, I think you just have to be careful.
Let's go down that path on a couple of it. I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I mean, just addressing Pete's concern about consumer protection. I mean, just the nature of the lease, I mean, versus a PPA, I mean, the customer, the lessee, they do have to take some operating risk. Now, there are nuances that you could build into a lease contract that could, kind of push some of the performance, not 100% of the performance or a portion of the performance, onto the installer, developer, sponsor. But I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just kind of to add to what
Somebody
Pete
called me
said,
somebody should.
I think because people know that Public Citizen is a consumer advocacy organization, among other things, we do get people reaching out to us proactively because they have issues with solar leases.
Yeah.
And the issues vary, right? Sometimes it's that the system has not been maintained and yet the company is still trying to bill them, right? So they're not getting any bill benefit, but they're still expected to pay. But But sometimes it's right at the front end, like in the sales process. And that one's not infrequent, I would say, that what the person is told verbally doesn't end up matching what they sign. And, some of these agreements are lengthy and complicated and, frankly, I think some companies or some salespeople at some companies, whatever, like maybe intentionally target people who they think aren't going to read everything. Maybe pressure them, whatever. There's a lot that can go on there, but it definitely happens. So I think the education is key. And I would just say, like, in terms of the timing and like, I know that with your current program, I think there's a requirement there, right? To let they have to do the education before the contract is finalized. That is like even more important
They do the
here.
education after and have buyer's remorse, they can be let out of their contract.
Right. So,
We can only
definitely,
work that through an incentive program.
right.
So that's question three there.
So I think that's really important, but I hear the like legal and like the standardizing a contract idea, but I would just, I guess, put another +1 for that strategy because that would also allow you to like not only to standardize, but to hopefully make them shorter, right? Like, and I mean, seriously, people are not gonna read however many, dozens of pages or whatever, like, it's just, it's not gonna happen to
Open it out
people.
there. What about a cover sheet to the contract?
But we're doing a TDLR right now with this other
Yeah,
consumer protection
I
bill we
think
just got passed.
any sort of like standardized summary or whatever, but like the company, that needs to be part of the legal document, so the company can't then go into page whatever, 52 and be like, well, here it says something different. It's like, well, that wasn't in the summary, so
I think it's,
no.
they do include that. It's really difficult because the terms are nuanced. And I think they're covering situations where if you get into it, I mean, if there's like fraud, the term sheet or the cover sheet covers it. But if there's an event to adjudicate, it's difficult, I would say. I think that's where our experience has been that the lenders, the leasers, like, it's non-negotiable. If they say, whatever it is, whatever term is there.
Take it or leave it.
Venue, for example, it's like, it's in Delaware or
Yeah.
wherever, it's like, and I think they do we've also pushed for get something that's digestible for everybody, but it's hard to be comprehensive, I would say, because that's what the document is.
Yeah.
Maybe if, let me get this straight, you're asking us to crowdsource the key things, like the key terms that could be drafted as a sort of template for standard check. It's not necessarily the language that's going to be represented, but it's, and do you have a good sense of how many terms those are? Like, from y'all look at like, is it half dozen, is it one?
I don't know.
It's not one.
Okay.
That's actually.
Yes.
Kilowatt hours. Escalators, something that gets a.
Yeah, right.
It's just, concerning.
Is that something you could put out there? Just like these are the topics that we need?
Oh, we said, so we can help.
Yeah, I know y'all, legal's not gonna write the terms, but
Right.
we could go back to lenders and say, because we've said there's, some really big ones don't say this. And they kind of don't listen, but they say these are the 6 non-negotiable things you have to be clear about.
Okay, I like that. Could use yourself. We can look at what, once we have, there's a small handful, with a lot of help for stakeholders on coming up with things. Okay. Go ahead, Alex. Looking forward as well.
I guess I'm not following this very well. The lease that you're talking about drafting, is that simply a prototype?
No, we're not talking about drafting any leases. We're actually talking about allowing equipment leases to be part of the market here, but having customers and contractors sign that they're not participating in a lease that would not be compliant with our law.
So you're not drafting the lease that would be binding on each lender, because that would drive them all crazy, right?
Right, we've got our legal crazy.
So you're just drafting conditions that their leases would have to meet.
Basically.
Who's going to judge that?
So they're well, I mean, it's on the customer and the contractor to meet those requirements, and they're signing an attestation that they are meeting those requirements.
And if it turned out later that they didn't meet the requirements, would that be like justification for the customer exiting the lease?
That would be a signal for us to revoke interconnection approval.
So we either stop it from being energized, or if it comes later in the process, it's after it's been energized, then right, we need to have something baked in, so where we have to pull the plug on it. And then the customer cannot be liable then to continue paying them. So we have to figure something out.
If the attestation is enough to protect KP from recourse.
Well, it's a way to red flag it for consumers.
Yes,
I think it's a way to say, guys, you know, does it meet this? Because I've got to sign this.
exactly. Well said. One, yes, Ms. Smith?
Oh, I was actually just gonna ask that question. If the intent of the IA was to basically have a dotted line to the generator and have some recourse against non-performance of the generator or the sponsor. And so it sounds like that is in fact the case. And so using Pete's language is, you can basically, provide a warning to customers that if their IA or their interconnection has been severed for some reason, then that could be, give rise to non-performance of the equipment under the lease.
Yeah. That's a great way of saying it. That's right.
So are you envisioning that part of those like kind of key requirements would be some sort of performance guarantee that is not kilowatt hour based, that is like uptime based? Because I do have a concern with like a lease where the customer has no guarantee of the equipment working. I mean, that's literally what we get people calling us about is like the equipment's not working.
I don't think we'd be formatting what it is. I think the attestation would just say they're agreeing what it is not. It is not them, it's not the provider selling energy to that customer.
But it would also delineate our recourse.
Right.
Would be letting them know that we would pull. And so as part of that, we need to craft some language around this does not come back to the customer if your agreement is not compliant with that rules.
Again,
Well,
we need to
there's-
do it early enough in the process rather than waiting till interconnection,
Yeah.
waiting for it to be energized.
It's upfront. And then,
Okay,
and
it's
to
upfront,
address your concern, Kaiba, we're not trying to say that they can't have production guarantees. We want to figure out how we can enable that and still be within the boundaries of this isn't a purchase of energy, but rather an equipment lease with a production guarantee. But there's a fine line there. And we want to show what that line is transparently.
How does that work that it isn't? Yeah, I'm curious.
Well,
What would those words look like?
we're still honing in on that. And so like, I can't say what that looks like at the moment, but I can say, there's some gray area there to say, okay, we're going to true up on a kilowatt hour every day based on your meter read. Or we're going to true up every 3 years, and we're only going to compensate you for lost production, not excess production. And it's going to be at this nominal rate that doesn't correlate with actual rates, and different like things that they can do to make it look less and less like a power purchase agreement. So we need to figure out what that line, where those boundaries are with legal. But when we do, we intend to put those into the interconnection agreement document and have that signed by both the customer and the system owner, so that they're very clear what those guidelines are.
Okay. I guess a piece of feedback is that 3 years is a very long time for somebody to be paying on a
That was
lease.
just an example.
Even a year is a very long time for somebody to pay on a lease that the equipment's not working. So
Well, I think year is pretty typical for leases. for true ups. If anybody else has other experience, let me know, but all the leases I've seen true up on an annual basis.
But in terms of like getting service, I mean, I would think it should be,
So like response times.
Oh, response time is different.
yeah,
This is just an annual mechanism to,
Trip
to
cost.
actually pay it
Yes.
out.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's those kind of things that we're looking at.
okay.
So we're at 5. So I'll propose I can have a second group that has a little more focus on this topic. And we can ask these same questions. I could ask y'all to reach out with any other pieces, but I think the ones of major focus are what we could be including in the educational component. Stan, thank you for, we'll start to list that out. Love your thoughts on, and everybody here's thoughts on the common pitfalls that customers can fall into and how we can educate them to avoid this.
Well, just to clarify, and that's part of it, but it's really for the agreements, like what are the lines in the sand for you guys? If you just said cannot, I mean, what are the attestation, if you have that drafted and say, you know, you're attesting that you're not doing X, and what's that next? Gotcha, you have that, yeah.
So, yeah, we'll have to, most of our lines in the sand are based on legally protecting our ability to sell energy, you know. That being said, there are some lines about customer protection that have the lawyers and all of us here are concerned about, so.
Yeah.
We'll pick through that. But, you know, common term, we just wanted to understand from y'all, like, some of these kind of talked about, what happens if the system isn't performing? What happens if the home changes ownership? What happens if somebody stops paying? They stop paying all of these? You know, just kind of understanding how that would go down contractually. Most lease agreements would be good to know. We'd love y'all's opinion, you know, y'all are public stakeholders, a lot of y'all are obviously customers. These would be your ratepayer money going to incentivize this program. So having some feedback from you about whether you think this is an appropriate use of public funds would be great to have your opinion on. And then, you know, how can we work together to create something that doesn't leave customers high and dry, leaves them educated and have them a good experience? So that's question 9. How can we collaborate to overcome barriers? So if you want to introduce us to people we should be talking to, people who have done this well, people who have not done this well, you know, those are kind of my first thoughts about how we can work together moving forward beyond just collecting your feedback on these questions. One big question I have and love to get an answer, or if we need to come back to it, is who should sign this interconnection agreement? So who are parties to a typical contract? Is it just the homeowner and the leasing company, or is the contractor also a party? Does it make sense to have all 3 signed, to have just 2 of those signed? If we ask for the system owner to sign this interconnection agreement, is that feasible? Are they just some buddy stamping things in a skyscraper in New York City? Or are they somebody that you can actually get a hold of and get their signature on? Is that gonna cause a kink in the sales process? So, you know, these are all the kind of questions we have. I'm happy to go over if you want, but I'm proposing we follow up with a second meeting of, you know, to get you out of here for today.
One more thing I'd like to add. I think everyone here understands that consumer protection is the prevailing thing we're focused on. That said, we all want to move fast as well.
Yeah.
So another question to this whole group is, how can we do both at the same time? How can we ensure that consumer protections are in place? But how can we also move fast at the same time? And I don't want to be, you know, sitting here 6 months from now without something that we're moving forward on.
I propose that we have a stakeholder meeting or 2 as soon as possible, and that you all work on your attorneys to get it moved through their system as soon as possible. That we
We're
aim
meeting
to,
with our
that we aim,
attorneys weekly.
pardon?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah, you're
meeting with
looking
our
at it,
attorneys
yeah.
weekly.
Well, if we have 2 more meetings and say we want to have this stuff resolved by the end of the second, meeting, send us home with homework.
Homework for today is think about if we're signing this agreement, who should be the parties to the contract that will be binding, who should be signing this. And then how can we protect customers? What are the big clauses, things that could happen, unintentional consequences? You know, what are the things that we should be on the lookout for so that we can try and craft language to either inform customers to be aware, or, you know, if we can, to put lines in the sand and say a lease cannot be compliant if you have language like this.
One other maybe, one more maybe for myself or for you. it will happen where someone will do a solar DPO and then they'll do batteries, 2 years from now. And so what does that look like for your own inter-program relationships? We're seeing that already in the market. That leads to customer dissatisfaction, not so much protection, but they don't understand whose kilowatt hour is where and how it's allocated. And I think we should put some thought to that. What does a solar only, what does PV only look like? Then how would batteries in the future participate in that from a metering, from an incentive, from everything else?
So this is greater than just the leasing companies about just integrating standalone batteries into existing solar.
Yeah, it's somewhat of the X factor, but that seems to be the norm. Okay. I think when people are doing things in some phase or
Makes sense. Yeah, let's talk about hear what's happening and what the challenges are. Cool. All right, I'll pause for any last comments and then we'll try and schedule something pretty quickly on the next meeting because we got some momentum here. Want to keep it moving. So yeah, any last questions, comments to get on the table? Otherwise, we'll collect all of this feedback, put it into the next agenda.
There's a couple of things in the chat.
Okay.
Those who just comments, I read them out loud. Okay, leasing should be expanded to third-party ownership and include battery storage as independent systems as well as integrator solar plus storage. And then Ray says, in line with customer protection, what if Austin Energy has a process in place to approve the solar leasing companies? Only those companies could be approved for system installs on the AE grid. Installers may choose from among approved leasing vendors.
So those are things we can do if we have an incentive.
Okay, and then the last one, there's a few states that have disclosure forms that we are required to submit utility,
Like
when we submit for any, the forms include financing info, production estimates, warranty and transfer of ownership info. It may be worth a look into doing something similar.
like that. Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about, like a cover sheet, a term sheet, a disclosure document. I think that makes sense. Then we can split it. Cool. All right. Well, y'all drive safe. 10 after 5. Yeah, be safe out there. And be careful.